So next up, we have a presentation from drug discovery and development company, Vectus Biosystems, with the ticker code VBS. I will hand you over to our non-executive director and deputy chairman, Maurie Stang. Good morning, Maurie.
Good morning, Jane, and thanks for having me on.
Let me pull up your presentation.
So Vectus Biosystems is focused on a global unmet need, which is fibrosis, which is a progressive condition in the main cardiovascular system. And at the moment, we have a lead and two emerging additional lead compounds. The company has been listed on the ASX. I'm pleased to say the market capitalisation is significantly up on the number on this screen. Our board consists of Dr. Ron Schneer, who is the Medical Director of IMED, as our chairman, myself, Dr. Karen Duggan, who's our CTO and co-founder, Mr. Peter Bush, who's a CA, and Dr. Susan Pond, who used to head up Biotech. And when we talk about the pharmaceutical indications, we believe that Vectus is a world leader in the research of antifibrotics, and B, this is the largest single franchise in the world. VB0004, which we now have in phase 1, addresses not only hypertension, but cardiac, renal, and pulmonary fibrosis. VB832, pulmonary fibrosis of the liver. And finally, A79 is very focused on pulmonary fibrosis. We have an exceptional library of patents, many of them granted, but still with a long life to go. We have a recent $7 million round completed, and a strong team both at the board level and the executive level. There are a couple of features here that we need to talk about. Reimbursement in the pharmaceutical industry is generally focused on matching existing drugs, be they generic or otherwise. But if you can have first in class, the reimbursement is calculated on the impact. And here you see the size of some of these markets. They're very significant. So Vectus today has really worked with some of the largest pharmaceutical companies on the planet, and they've been very clear about what they want to see when they partner with a company such as Vectus. They need to understand the target. They prefer to see a platform technology rather than a single compound. It's got to be transformational. What that means is it has a significant clinical effect. It's not just a drug that may give you a short period of benefit. We've had very strong animal model studies. We've demonstrated our toxicology and safety. Our IP portfolio is very, very broad and deep. We've proven we can synthesize the drugs. We've got a very cost-competitive manufacturing, and our IP covers both indications. We're now in a phase 1 study, and as we've announced, we're moving into the third cohort of the SAD study, and we'll be producing human PD efficacy data. So in addition to the work, we've also published giving validation to the target. And here you see two really important points. One, we're having a profound effect on systolic blood pressure, which is the harder to manage. But secondly, we're doing it through functional changes, not artificially depressing the blood pressure reading. And this demonstrates a outcome which is the result of taking fibrotic scar tissue and making it functional again. On the right-hand side, you can see the progression in our controlled studies. The blue on the top right is showing fibrotic damage. We go through the 18 weeks, and at the end, you can see on the bottom right, there is perfectly normal architecture and tissue. And this is not only slowing down disease progression, this is reversing it. Similarly, we see this in the kidneys. As I've said before, people going on to dialysis have a massive impact socially and individually, and the costs are between 50 and 150,000 per patient. So similarly, you see here on the right-hand side, the significant effect from the top right to the bottom right. Thank you. And pulmonary fibrosis is something we're all hearing about because it is one of the potential outcomes of severe COVID disease. And again, we see a significant impact in not only stopping disease progression, but reversing it at the 20-week period. And again, what's really important is the pharmaceutical industry favours orally dosable drugs. We started off with a peptide, which, as a previous speaker mentioned, needs to be injected, but now we have a mimetic or a synthetic, which is an orally dosable one pill a day presentation, and that is really the key for the pharmaceutical interest. So we've done a broad range of work in addressing the safety prior to this phase 1 trial, and we've doubled the normal period of the toxicity studies. So we're able to run these studies now out for a longer period, i.e. 28 days, and that will segue into the 1B trials where we hope to show some efficacy and impact. So as I mentioned before, we've manufactured this in full pharmaceutical standards successfully now multiple times, and the cost of production is very attractive, and there really is no benchmark in terms of the likely price that the pharmaceutical companies would charge, but it would relate to the health economics, and we expect those to be substantial. So our intellectual property portfolio covers the path to discovery, the peptide fragments, and the composition of the mimetics, and the methods of use, and the manufacturing. We've had a lot of people looking at this patent portfolio, and to our knowledge, not a single valid objection has been raised throughout the entire filing process. So as we've announced to the market, we're in phase 1. That means we're trialling a single ascending dose at the moment, and those trials are moving into the 3rd cohort. Then we'll move to a multiple ascending dose where the patients or the subjects will be on for the entire period. We're working with well-identified biomarkers, and we're looking at the pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamic studies. We also have found in the preclinical work we've done a very significant ability for dosing. In other words, some drugs need to be titrated very carefully. In our case, that doesn't seem to be an issue, and the side effects seem to be minimal. So liver disease is a major unmet need because, particularly in this part of the world, in Asia Pacific, there's been hepatitis quite endemic, and whilst there are drugs that can stop the disease, it doesn't necessarily stop the fibrotic progression. So this is really very, very stark. If you look at the 20-week control, these are actually reversed. So on the right-hand side, you have the starting point. On the left-hand side, you see this near normal architecture and a very significant turnaround in disease. As I mentioned before, pulmonary fibrosis is generated by pollution, diesel particles, occupational health, such as silica, coal, etc., and many other causes. We believe that the compounds that we have in our library will progress into human trials as significant candidates to avoid disease progression. And in fact, we hope to reverse function and health. Again, blood pressure is an indication that we're doing something, and that is functional, not just suppressing the blood pressure. And again, the data on pulmonary fibrosis is impressive. If you look at the left to the likely progression to the right, in the middle we have VB0004 and A79, and both of them have improved the outcomes from the starting point, leave alone not allowing any disease progression. Similarly, you can see here on our A79. We've started to get interest in Alzheimer's and other neurodegenerative diseases, and we believe that this accumulation of tau proteins may be something we have a role in. Just want to recap, the patent portfolio is extensive and has a long runway, and we continue to file new IP. So Jane, thanks very much. I'll pass to you.
Maurie, thanks so much for the great presentation. We've had some questions, so I'll jump into them. So VBS recently announced the successful completion of the second of the 5 planned cohorts in the SAD segment of the human trial. Can you please tell us what this means for the company?
Yeah, so obviously we're very pleased to see the human results reflecting our preclinical work, our animal work, and our cell work. And of course, in a practical sense, the further we go down the phase 1 trials, the further de-risked is our proposition that VB0004 will be a high impact and very valuable drug.
And just on that, so what will the impact be if VB0004 is successful?
Look, if we look at the global statistics for pharmaceutical transactions, they tend to happen around this time. And clearly we've had interest and continue to have interest. And we hope by Q1 of 2022 calendar year, we'll have completed our 1B and we'll be on our way to global opportunities.
Wonderful. Thanks, Maurie. So a copy of today's presentation will be available online on brokerbriefing.com in the coming days. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Jane.